Hello, friends. Welcome. Welcome to this special webinar with Carolyn Myss on the mystical science of co-creation and why this matters so much today. My name's Tammy Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is always one of the greatest delights of my job to have the chance to be in conversation with Carolyn Myss. I was reflecting how long it's been since Carolyn and I have been working together, and I came up with something, these things get approximate, it's hard. 25 years with Sounds True. Carolyn has created more than 20 in-depth learning programs. For those of you who don't know Carolyn, she is a New York Times bestselling author, 5 books on the New York Times bestseller list. It's such a huge achievement. She's a medical intuitive, someone who is able to diagnose illness through intuitive means. And she is a fierce friend, someone who has been hugely influential in my life and the life of Sounds True. And I'm so happy to be having this conversation with her. It's in preparation for relaunching a course, The Great Transformation, 7 Inner Awakenings, Changing You and the World. It's a course in which Carolyn talks about her view and wisdom about this time that we're in, this time of great change, a turning point in our collective history as a human species. The course begins on June 20th, and you can learn more. Just hit the Learn More button on this page. And now, Carolyn, let's talk about the mystical science of co-creation.
Hello, you.
Hey, hey.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. Always a pleasure. 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. It does go fast, my friend. It does.
Indeed.
But this, this science of co-creation, the mystical science of co-creation, it couldn't be more of a passion for me, or the subject of transformation. Actually, you've got your hands on the two subjects that I feel most passionate about now. But before, I'd like to almost explain
Please.
why I have such a passion for teaching both topics and doing seminars and doing workshop courses that bring people down to the micro detail of what I'm talking about. You mentioned that, I started out as a medical intuitive. That is perhaps in the book Organic Divinity. I will explain finally how my path as a medical intuitive was perhaps always meant to bring me to where I am now, because everything of value that I have learned, everything about human nature, about us, about what's going on now, really came out of my becoming a very adept medical intuitive. Because I developed this skill at a time when nobody was a medical intuitive. And so I didn't go up, get up in the morning and Google myself.
Sure.
I didn't even have a computer. I just worked with Norm Shealy, a neurosurgeon. And I did not know that there was a chakra system. I knew nothing of this. This was all information that kind of came to me as I would do readings on people. But what I learned, because I was the blank slate, was that the nature of my whole understanding of power shifted from something external to my realizing that, my God, every choice we make is actually an act of co-creation. Every thought and if, when someone is ill, they want to know why did this happen? So they were always looking for a reason that could explain why their body was falling apart, or they had an illness. And in the beginning, I started with that same mathematics, Tammy. Well, there must be one reason for each thing. But eventually, the mathematics of ordinary thinking, 1 = 1, didn't work. I eventually kind of went to the quantum level, where I recognized that we are co-creating our lives in such a dynamic way, and that we make the mistake of thinking that unless a choice has a big consequence for us, makes a big difference of the problem we're looking at, costs a lot of money, brings a lot of rewards, the choice has no teeth to it. It has no power. When in fact, the more I became involved in trying to understand what makes us heal, why we don't heal, what the power within us, the more I came to realize that it's the smallest, the most invisible choices, the most personal choices that we make. The decision to not be integrous or be integrous. These core invisible decisions that then result in everything else. That they are the decision not to tell the truth versus tell the truth. These private little inner decisions are really the ones that hold the power that determines how you are, your anxiety attacks, your health. And the more I got down to these tiny little private decisions, the more I realized that I was actually looking at the content of one's soul. And that brings us to mysticism, which is that the soul is not a religious force. The soul is the life force itself. And that I think dare I even say this, but I think the incredible dynamic of transformation that every single human being is feeling, every single plant, every single creature on this planet is feeling. The ecology is feeling it. The economy is feeling it. The aquatic community is feeling it. There isn't any part of life on this planet that isn't undergoing a transformation. But the key to that is that it is the time for us to understand our organic authority, our holy organic authority, that we are participants in the creation of what happens here and not victims. That we have to define our power according to nuclear standards now. Our nuclear battery is our psyche and our soul. And we've entered our own inner nuclear age. And I think that as the world outside of us looks more and more chaotic, which it will, and it will continue to, it's because the systems that we've relied upon are just structures, but we empower them. And this is the dot we have to connect. That in fact, we are the source of what we are, the batteries of events that happen here, which brought me to really, once again, look at the mystical laws. The mystical laws that are a reflection of the physical laws of science. And the way I like to describe it to people is that if you think of mist, and mist is just, you think of light and mist, and that you can't capture it, it's amorphous, it's everywhere, but eventually mist will form a rain cloud and it localizes. And as it forms a rain cloud, it gathers weight, density to it. It's beginning to incarnate. And as the water incarnates, it becomes rain. And as the rain falls, it falls to a cold area, it becomes ice. This is how creation works. In the mist area, which is the soul, you are at liberty to pray, to receive guidance, to work with the laws of creation. Do you want to go left or do you want to go right? Once the decision is made, it begins to take shape in the physical world, and it becomes eventually ice formed. ice is the laws of science. So if you take a brick of ice and you throw it, it's going to fall down because that's the law of gravity. If you push it, it'll slide as far as the energy behind the shove that you gave it, the voltage. Once something is in physical form, and this is, I think Buddhism is so beautiful. You are looking at history at all times. You're always looking at the caboose on the train of a million choices that were made ahead of time for this physical moment to transpire. And that's the same thing I realize with health, that in order for me to get to understanding your health, I have to unravel you with some people, they can make the journey all the way up to the mystical level of their tiny quantum micro choices. What makes you judgmental? What words do you decide to use when you are in a situation? Do you go for fear words or do you go for words of wisdom? What vocabulary do you rely upon to interpret a moment? Because that will determine how the rain falls. So I realized that for all of my teaching about medical intuition and psychic, being intuitively adept as I am, that was nothing but a means to understand why we are in this era of deep and profound mystical awakening, why the traditional religions are going through a meltdown so that an organic divinity can emerge in which there is a faceless God, where God is understood as law and as light, which is the substance of the divine, and that our way of actually experiencing what God is like is through love. That is why love is so healing. That is why we crave it. And that love, light, and law, these three principles are the essence of the divine, and they're in everything and in everyone. So there it is. That's my skinny.
So there's a lot to talk about here. When you talk about God as love, light, and law, I think people probably have some connection to the feeling of love, to the experience of light. But when it comes to co-creating, what's the law part? The law expression of God, the mystical laws, if you will, that we need to know to be effective as co-creators.
I think the first light you want to turn on in people, and for all of you listening, I want you to really listen with this. You have to understand and face that you are a creature of law, whether that law are your habits, your rules, your routines, your traditions, your regulations. You cannot exist outside without having some kind of self-established rules and laws that allow you to govern and control your life. When I say God is law, now I'm going to focus your attention on all creation. And note that all creation is governed by law, from the speed of planets to the flow of the tides to our body. Our body is governed by mathematics and by law. At a certain age, we begin to menstruate. At a certain age, we stop. It is governed by a system bigger than ourselves. We have so many beats of our heart. If you go past that mathematically, you're going to have a heart attack. So we have to stay within the law of the heart. We have to stay within the law of blood pressure. We are creatures of the law. As I turn to my medical intuitive history, I will tell you that the issues people find most unforgivable are the ones in which they feel their laws were violated: justice, injustice, authority. So we are such creatures of law. And that is the nature of the divine. The divine is law. And because this is all the creation of a system that works, and it works because it is a flawless law design. And our task, this is where the mystical laws come in. Our task is to understand the laws of creation and live according to them, instead of stand outside the laws and think that accomplishing a successful life is getting enough stuff so that you can live above the law. The idea with mystical law is that the same laws that govern the physical world, the laws of cause and effect, action and reaction, the law of gravity, all of the laws, the law of magnetic attraction, all the laws exist at the mystical level of creation. A thought turns into a cause and effect. A choice has a consequence. Even what I have realized, and if there was a way to communicate this, which I hope I do in our series on transformation, because that's, I believe, our inability to comprehend our own power is one of the reasons we go through a transformation like this. We don't get it. Every word we say to ourselves, never mind someone else, is an act of inner creation of how will I create? How will I work with what's in front of me in this moment? How will I work with what I'm seeing? What word shall I use to describe what I'm looking at? Is it going to scare me, or should I say should it inspire me? Fear or inspiration? The choice of the vocabulary you put in your head is a choice to engage the laws of creation, of cause and effect, because it will determine how you think, the choices you make and the actions you take, and that affects your blood pressure, your organic system. Everything is the mystical laws, the laws of that start at the level of cause, and the physical world is effect.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned fear words or wisdom words, and I wonder if we can bring this really onto the ground, and you could give an example of what it would be like to respond internally with words of wisdom, what it would be like to respond internally with fear words, and the choice that we have.
You know, if you listen to people tell their stories, I always, when I listen to them, I listen for key words. What I realized when I was going through the stage of my life when I was focused on healing and trying to figure out why people heal, why they don't, this kind of thing, I recognized that a number of people who struggled with healing lived in the same vocabulary, which was a vocabulary of woundedness, a vocabulary of fear, a vocabulary of pessimism. You'd say, "What have you thought about doing?" "No, I can't do that." "Well, what about this?" "No, I can't do that." "No, that won't work." They automatically dismiss any power suggestions that come into them. They talk about, they want to tell their story about what happened to them and how it's impacted them again and again. And they'll bring up, "Well, I'm just too afraid to do that. I'm just, whereas, and I realized when someone lives in the vocabulary of fear, they can't heal. They absolutely cannot heal, Tammy, because the vocabulary alone handicaps the healing process. It negates all the powerful choices that you could make. Why is forgiveness so difficult? Why is that such a difficult thing for people to do? Because one of the words they hold on to is fair. It wasn't fair. I didn't deserve this. These words are so catastrophic to the healing process, because what you do is you anchor your psyche in this idea that you are owed something, that the world owes you something, that God owes, that destiny, fate, somebody, something owes you something, because in your world, in your mind, you suffered unfairly. So this kind of vocabulary that encourages a person to feel like their life, above all else, they suffered more, they didn't deserve this, they shouldn't have gotten this, they got a raw deal. Any vocabulary, any words that keep you in that mindset. I don't care how many massage therapists and healers you go to and whatever, you're not getting out of your suffering, because you are dwelling in a sea of suffering, in a suffering vocabulary. And what I realized, I have to introduce a different vocabulary to these people. I have to tell, and I'd say, let's not talk about your wounds. Let's talk about where your power is today. What empowers you today? Where do you draw your strength from? And how many of them found that to be an intimidating question? Because it causes them to have to acknowledge they have strength in them, but they don't actually want to access it. So, and this is the power of words and the power of actually encouraging someone to speak it out. But if someone could take one word out, if I said, I'll tell my students, take the word deserve out. Don't use that word anymore. Don't ever say that. If you want to go out and eat a chocolate cake, go ahead and do it. But don't say you deserve it because you've had a good or a bad day. Stop talking to yourself that way. Don't use that word, because it focuses you on how you see others. Did that person deserve a break or not? Do they deserve more than me? You are always measuring things. Take the measuring vessel out and then start saying, everything in my life is a blessing, and I'll find a way to see it as a blessing. Put the word blessing in. Put the word timing in. Everything is divine timing. Start putting words in that are incredibly effective, not just in yourself, but they're mystically effective, because there's faith and what you are actually saying in your own prayer by choosing these words is, you didn't screw up. You didn't screw up my life. I just kept looking for different rewards. Now I'm going to live the life I have and assume that this is the path you want me on. And so every day I will find a way to bless this path, and I won't measure it in what I deserve and not. What am I talking about? I have no idea. I don't talk to God that way anymore. I just simply say, the day is perfect as it is. Now I will look for blessings and I will share blessings. Put the word in, put giving vocabulary in, compassion. What can I do for someone else? Be of service. You choose a vocabulary that is spiritually active.
Okay, now during this time of great transformation, I think a lot of us do feel fear for different reasons. Fear about all kinds of things. Fear if it's okay to go to the grocery store or send our kids to school, all kinds of fears. What do we do internally so that we're working with ourselves in a productive way and we're not denying the fact that we feel afraid?
Well, I think I first of all, Tammy, I will never underscore that there is a legitimate reason for people in the American society to feel terrified, because it's become a mad gun society. There's just and I think, as I would say to my students, I want, imagine that we're in a building and every floor is a different view of the same thing. I can't change the building, but if I took you to the second floor, you're going to see the problem a little bit bigger. If I take you to the third floor, you'll see even more of the city. If I take you to the fourth, you're going to see the whole city. So in that same way, giving someone an answer from the first floor will never help. I have to get people to come up to a higher view of the fact that they're living, that it's a privilege to be alive now. That's number one. That two, they're participating in an era of transformation, unlike anything that the planet, we've never faced and confronted the challenge of entering a global community while becoming a unified, entering a galactic community while becoming a unified global village. And all of this is terrifying every single human being at some level. who wants to go back to the earth with countries as boundaries and the safety that they once knew growing up. But what is obvious is that we have moved into the era of holism, that the way for us to solve the dilemmas confronting human beings, not problems, but predicaments and dilemmas, that it's going to take all or nothing, like the pandemic. It's going to affect everybody. And so we can create solutions by, the greatest problems we have are not climate change, not pollution, not anything that. The greatest problem we have is fear of each other, and fear that there won't be enough, fear that change means I have to squirrel things away and other people don't get it, don't, because I don't care if they don't have it, I just have to have it. The primal fears that arise during times of change, the idea that survival means we have to kill other people in order to survive. These are our greatest problems, far more than climate change, far more than climate, is that we have to get over the fear of other people. We have to get over the fear of empowering other people. If there is the greatest challenge every human being has at the end of the day is becoming someone who actually can understand that the greatest gift they can give is the capacity to empower, to truly empower everybody they meet in any way they can, through giving them confidence, through giving them a compliment, through listening to them, through acknowledging them, whatever it is. But the more power we give to others, the more we empower others through the power, the light in us. This is love, the love and light in us. It will work to heal the hostility and fear that breeds when people think there isn't enough, when in fact, this is what's so true. Our capacity to receive inspiration is, I believe, totally tied to our capacity to be generous of heart. If, it's like discovering the vaccine for polio. It happened after World War II when, America was feeling on top of the world and it felt like it could give to everybody. And Jonas Salk gets the inspiration for polio, which struck as an epidemic at the same time as the Depression. So the idea that what's really the problem is the fear of each other. And that causes people to want to have guns, to want to hunker in, to want to go back to religions that separate people instead of unite people. That, when I do a transformation, the reason I wanted to do that seminar with you so badly was because this era of transformation that we're living, it wasn't unexpected. People have for a long time felt that there's change in the air, something's in the air, something's got to change, something in this world has got to change. And as I walk through the decades in that series on transformation, taking people through and talking about the changes that are archetypally predetermined when transformations happen, they can see that it's in their life in some way, that they're being touched in some way by the need to become whole, not just by food, but that, and this brings in the mystical laws, that by following, there's a reason why we've awakened intuitively. We receive a sense of guidance that tells us this is right, this is wrong, this is okay, this is not okay. Following the law of balance within ourselves, the law, that inner metronome within ourselves, allows us to then make decisions that maintain our micro balance. And if you maintain your micro, you contribute that to the macro. And this is this era of transformation in which, believe it or not, we won't live to see this, Tammy. But as the decades go by, and maybe the centuries, this teaching of organic divinity, this teaching of the mystical laws as the laws that really govern our intuitive system, that govern the way we need to make choices, that determine the energy we give to the world that becomes its means to create. This will be what people understand as the spiritual physics, metaphysics. It is spiritual physics. And that they'll finally get is the nature of God.
Now, you said, Carolyn, it's a privilege to be alive right now. And I think a lot of people are having the inner dialogue. It's a burden to be alive right now. It's such a difficult time. Tell
Yes.
me, how have you been able to reframe this as it's a privilege to be alive right now?
It is a privilege because every single person, first of all, I think it's a privilege to be alive during an era when it is so obvious that the divine is shifting, is revealing its power to human beings in a very different way. Two, because we're in this time between, shall we call it the fossil age and the solar age, and I mean SOLAR and SOULAR, this is the time of chaos on the bridge between these two worlds. But it's during this time of chaos that a great deal of choice and new possibilities are born. That in fact, we are watching the old way fade in the background, but it opens it up for possibilities, for people who have imagination, for people who have a sense of inner self, to take away the shackles that the old world contained and imagine, what if I went with my creativity? What's stopping me from going into different kind of inner resources through which I could co-create something brand new for this world? So there's going to be a lot of chaos, and it's very chaotic for people who, when they make decisions, look to their past as a reference point and try and chart their course to go back to their past. That's going to be chaotic. If you grew up a coal miner, you would be foolish to tell your children to be coal miners.
Sure.
There comes a point where you have to realize this part of life has come to an end, and therefore I have to tell my children to learn the skills that are emerging, go to learn computer science, learn an energy skill, because the fossil skills are over with. But we're in an era where a lot of people earn their living with fossil skills and haven't yet tooled up in the energy. This is no different than the agricultural industrial shift that caused great economic crises until it got balanced out. So for a lot of people, what I tell them again and again is if you invest in your inner resources, as someone would say, well, I've got 5 kids, how am I going to go back to school? It's very, to me, I think I've watched women brilliantly learn skills off the internet, and then, find ways to go back. There's so many ways to go back to school off the internet, to take online courses, to get degrees, to get skills, to learn something like become a masseuse or some kind of healing skill that can be applied in short order to a different economy for yourself, where you can tool up in the energy world. This is a time of crisis, but it's also a time of transformation that will bring out ways of living together. Communities are forming, cohabitation communities are forming, ways of supporting people that taking in refugees from a war. All kinds of different opportunities are being offered to be part of the problem-solving solution of people who need their problems helped. So both are true.
Now, Carolyn, there's one topic I really want to make sure we get to in this conversation. You go into some depth on this topic in the Great Transformation series, which is the difference between fate and destiny. And here we are at a time where there's so much chaos in the world. How this all plays out, how much of it is actually up to us, and how much is just, it's destined anyway, it's going to go this way. And, you know, how do you understand the difference both? And how can we appreciate this in our individual lives and on the collective scale, fate and destiny?
Well, for me, fate is what unfolds when you don't have the courage to make a bold choice. And then you've just literally turned it over to the fates to take, you know, it's not unlike the fates coming in and saying, well, if you're not going to go out shopping for an outfit that's just right for you, then you're going to be stuck with what we can find in your closet. Fate is to wear. And that's really the simplest way to put it. You don't have the energy to go out and make the effort for yourself on behalf of yourself to get yourself in shape so you could wear some high-end designer clothes that would change your destiny. But instead, you just let the fates pick the stuff from the closet. And that's what you go out with. And you look in, your clothes are 10, 20 years old and your shoes don't match. But you could have gone shopping. You could have said, you know what, I have this important thing that I really want to look my best. And so I think I'm going to drop 10 pounds before then. I think I'm going to I'm going to put effort in. Destiny is effort, but it's conscious effort. I'm going to work out. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to go out and find a damn good, even if I have to budget do my budget differently so that I don't get this, but I can put another $100 toward an outfit. That's destiny. You've realized I have a moment here that could make a difference, but in order to make a difference, I have to put effort into it. Fate is what comes to you when you don't get off the couch. Destiny is what happens when you go out and you design your furniture.
Okay, so now I just want to track back to this whole co-creation, the co-part. We're creating with reality. We're creating with the divine. It's a co-creative process. How much say do we have in creating our quote unquote destiny? Are we like 50-50 partners with the divine? How do you see it?
This brings me back to my work as a medical intuitive, where it taught me that to be very careful in trying to figure out what decisions and what thinking I have in myself that has power and what doesn't. So when I say to people, if you generate in yourself resentment toward others, if you think I better get a gun because my way of being safe is to kill, if you generate any of that kind of harbor those kinds of feelings and those judgments, you don't realize that you're co-creating. You're co-creating. That's an act of co-creation. And that spills into the collective psychic free radical pool that creates a violent nation. Because you are yourself participating in the psychic field of fear. That if you buy into lies, you support the absence of truth. That the most incredible gift you can give to yourself is the decision to become discerning. Discerning about what it is you believe, and to start paying attention to the consequence of your small decisions inside. So you begin to see how, in fact, how very powerful you are. That you are your best friend. You're the one you talk to more than anybody in your life, because you're always talking to yourself. That as an act of co-creation, to start transforming yourself, start paying attention to the quality of conversation you have with yourself, whether or not you're encouraging of yourself within yourself, or whether or not you encourage pessimism, passivity, fate to take over, or whether you can talk yourself into, I'm going to try this. I can feel that this unhappiness in me needs to be resolved, and it won't be by a book, it's by action. What one action can I take? Even if it's changing one word, I will no longer tell myself that I deserve something different. Instead, I will say, give me the grace to appreciate what I have. And I'll start each day with that. Shifting your inner dialogue begins to and here's another one, and it's faith. And that most people don't have a lot of faith. And that's a rusty mechanism in people, and that is a crisis. And so because if you don't have faith in yourself, you'll never have faith in another person, and you won't have faith in, it's impossible to have faith in something you cannot see when you can't even have faith in something you can see. So the other mechanism that I would encourage people, as in terms of the mystical wisdom, is to develop faith in yourself. Never mind God, you'll get to God, but develop faith in yourself. Don't break your word to yourself. If you say, I'm going to start walking 5 blocks a day to get some exercise, that's a contract you've made with yourself. Don't break it. Don't break it. You have to develop faith in yourself. And this is where this goes. Once you develop, and you're going to meet the saboteur who'll say, start tomorrow. No, when you give yourself your word, you keep your word to yourself. Because this is how you start to build spiritual integrity. And as you do, what that allows to happen is that spigot of intuition goes from gut response to actually drops of guidance. Guidance is higher than just gut response, like should I get this or not? But droplets of guidance is direct to you. And you don't once you have a little faith in yourself, you are now activating your intuitive mechanism. So that when you have that whole sense of guidance that says, hey, why don't you do this? You can create that. You trust it in a way, you don't dismiss it, because you've earned your destiny. You've earned a relationship with the inner dialogue of faith and guidance. You've earned it. You started to wash the dishes every day and do what you said you would do. You earned faith in yourself, and that's the payoff.
Mm-hmm. What if someone's questioning, I wonder sometimes when there's something I want to co-create, if it's coming from self-interest, something, or if I'm actually receiving genuine guidance that this is something that is being called right now? How do I know the difference?
Well, guidance, that's a church and state question, because what you've just said is if it's genuine guidance, it shouldn't be connected to ambition or da-da-da-da. But I think that guidance, higher guidance, always requires something of you. It always requires that you take a risk, or that you change, or that you have to rely on yourself in a way that is intimidating. So these are kind of like the signatures of higher guidance, because it's for you. It's not, and in the process of you following it, you become more reliant on inner guidance than external. And that's part of the seduction of heaven. That's exactly how heaven works. It seduces you because it gives you guidance that's risky, but they oftentimes can't be validated. You have to put everything on the line, but that's what destiny, that is what that kind of power in you is about. And from a different point of view, part of this chaos and so many people getting unplugged from, say, tradition safer routes to finding themselves on their own. I think part of that is that they're not on their own, but they have to learn to rely on different forces in themselves, like faith and intuitive reasoning and intuitive guidance. In a way, instead of when it first came out years ago, and we used to talk about, inner guidance as to, well, should I get this house? Should I marry this person? And now it's at the survival level. How do I survive? How do I, what can I do to get through this moment? What can I get through to get through this day? How do I get through my sadness? How do I get through this? We are being directed to the inside of ourselves, Tammy. And that's what's true. And getting people, just like in a Buddhist retreat, getting people to detach even from the slightest illusion on the outside is ruthlessly painful. There's nothing easy about learning that so much was a distraction and getting to the truth that you're in charge of what you create. You know what? I'm a big fan of Russian history, period. But I loved reading about Catherine the Great. And she used to dress herself in pearls and diamonds and jewels, and probably that weighed as much as both of us. But she said, in order for me to maintain power over this nation, the biggest nation in the world, Russia, she said, I have to present myself as an illusion, as some kind of goddess, some kind of impervious queen, empress. Otherwise, they will see me as only a human being. So all this costumery is to fool them, not me. In that same way, I think that she knew how easily a person could be seduced by an illusion, by a gem, by this, by that. I think what this time is about, which is why it's going to be so ruckus, is that great teaching of Buddha about what is illusion and what's truth is coming home for us. We have to, as I say to people, if you only knew how powerful you were, you're used to being afraid. You are used to talking to yourself as though you're frightened of this world. You're used to telling yourself that you're only one person. What can you do? This is exactly what has to get transformed. We are in a world of madness because individuals have made incredibly poor choices. And we can change things by incredibly empowered choices within ourselves. One of which is to decide, I'm not going to be frightened. I'm only frightened because I think somebody else should come to my rescue. That's not going to happen. I need to trust that if I'm here, there's reason and purpose to every day of my life.
Carolyn, every time we talk, I learn something. Or a few things every single time. And it's not just that I learn things, it lifts me up into a space of taking more conscious choice over my life and not waiting for someone to come and do something or other to help me.
Tammy, the most frustrating thing for me is, it's amazing, and I never thought this day would come, when I would actually say the most frustrating thing for me is that I want people to understand the power in them, that they are not accessing. I want them to understand why this world is transforming now and that they are on this journey collectively. And if you understood the journey, you would cherish your place in it and you wouldn't be afraid. You would recognize the signs. That's why we did this series. You would recognize the signs of why things are happening, and you would make decisions intuitively that moved you in the direction of your inner transformation and not away from it. If you know, let me just give people a clue. If you know that the way evolution is moving us now, the way the heavens are moving us now, is toward becoming whole. If you only use that as a map and say, with every decision you make, will this make my life more whole or will it bring fragments? If your answer is fragments, you're making the wrong decision. Move in the direction as if you had a template through which you look and you say, every decision I make has got to increase my sense of being whole. If not, you're fragmenting and it won't work. So right there, you're using the mystical laws in a practical way.
Mhm. You know, as I mentioned in the beginning, we've worked together to create more than 20 in-depth learning programs. And I actually think, and this is, going out on a limb here, but I think the Great Transformation series is my favorite. I think it's my favorite. And I think that's because it covers so much ground and it's so needed at this time. And it brings together so many different themes and topics that you've taught on over the last couple decades. So I just want to say that, Carolyn, it's a
Well,
series I really love.
I thank you. And it was one of the few times in my life where I did something I felt I had to do versus I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I felt like the way in which the world is changing needs to be both presented in an archetypal way, but it also needs to be presented in an inspiring way. And also with this sense of things are going to change. We're not going backwards, but there's a reason for it, and evolution always wins.
Mm-hmm. The Great Transformation course begins on June 20th, 7 inner awakenings that are changing you and the world. Come join us. There's an early enrollment discount before June 16th. And the series ends. I said, hey, Carolyn, will you teach a practice? And of course, I was imagining from all of my meditation training, something like that, you would take us through some kind of guided practice. And you said, well, this is going to be something where we're not sitting passively, we're taking actions, and we're going to learn about the actions we can take that will really empower other people, the practice of empowering others. And I wonder if we can end our conversation, Carolyn, on that note. And if you just can give people a couple of very specific suggestions of what they can do in certain moments where maybe they might have held back, where they could actually empower and bless other people.
Well, the first practice, and this is a practice, is to recognize that every interaction, that power is the fundamental ingredient. And that power is light, and it's love, and it's governed by law. And so with that in mind, recognize that every single interaction you have is an opportunity for you to shine your light upon another person or not. No matter what action you do, the light will go through the action, but live within this teaching that whatever I do is an opportunity for me to shine my light upon another person. Whether I do that with kindness, watching my vocabulary, watching my tone of voice, whether I pass someone and decide to view them with compassion instead of judgment, you are always shining your light upon them. And what you have to trust is that is a profound act of service and co-creation. And that I would ask you to remember a time when someone smiled at you, just a smile, and it shifted something in you. It made you okay. It made you feel like, you're not angry at me. You made me feel like all was well. And that is what it's like to feel someone's light shine upon you. So remember that and just start by realizing it's powerful for me to shine my light upon someone or decide not to, which is also felt with equal impact.
Mhm. Carolyn Myss, thank you so very much for being here for this special offering to the Sounds True audience in advance of
I
the
hope
Great
they take this
Transformation.
course
I do too.
because
I
it
do
was
too.
such a pleasure to do the course. And sometimes you can't stop teaching. There's so much. I think you'll have to listen to it a few times, but it was really a good course. We
And
did good.
Carolyn will also be joining us and offering 2 live question and answer sessions as part of the Great Transformation.
Yeah,
Come join us for the series. All
my
right, Sounds
pleasure.
True, waking up the world. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.